one very helpful aspect of the book is the glossary of terms that you include in the beginning.
Hmm.
And
It's actually in the end of the printed version.
oh, it is. All right. So I received
Yeah.
a pre-publication copy.
I moved it to the back. It just felt a little textbooky to confront it first.
It is very textbooky, but it helps provide people with, whether at the back of the book or the beginning, definitions that I think can help to inform the conversation. So for people who have heard the term, no doubt, psychedelic or psychedelics, but are unclear on exactly what that refers to, could you define that? What are psychedelics?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Try. One of the interesting aspects of the story, of the history of what we'll call psychedelics, for reasons I'll explain, is that the name kept changing because people really didn't understand these molecules. They were so strange. So at first they were called psychotomimetics. This is in the early 50s, soon after LSD was made available to researchers. And psychotomimetic basically meant it was a psychoactive drug that mimicked psychosis. And lots of psychiatrists would look at what happened to people and say, well, they're having a psychotic episode. Turned out to be wrong, but it sure looked that way. And then other people called it a psycholytic, which means mind loosening. And they were using it in basically in your typical talk therapy session as a way to loosen. Lytic means mind loosening people's defenses and allow them to get in touch with subconscious thoughts and emotions. Psychedelic as a term is coined in 1957 by a key figure in this history named Humphrey Osmond. Osmond is an English psychiatrist who moves to Saskatchewan because the provincial government was willing to let him study whatever he wanted, which happened to be mescaline and LSD. And they had a very progressive health department in Saskatchewan. And he got involved with Aldous Huxley, and in fact is the person responsible for giving Aldous Huxley his first mescaline experience. And they corresponded extensively, as people used to do. And in one of their correspondence, they were trying to come up with a better word for these drugs because they simply didn't believe it was true that it made people crazy. In fact, they believed they could make people sane. So they went back and forth, and Osmond, ironically enough, not the brilliant writer, came up with the term that stuck, and that was psychedelic. And that essentially, all that means is mind manifesting, that these are compounds that help the mind manifest its deepest qualities. And it caught on, and we think of it as a very kind of 60s term associated with Timothy Leary and the counterculture, but in fact it was coined by a psychiatrist in the 50s. So it simply means mind manifesting, and I use it to refer to what are sometimes called the classical psychedelics. I tend not to think of MDMA as a psychedelic, even though some people do, or cannabis as a psychedelic. But that group of chemicals that include mescaline, DMT, psilocybin, magic mushrooms, and LSD, and there's a handful of others that are unified by the fact that they work on a similar receptor network in the brain and have roughly similar effects on the mind, on the phenomenology of the experience. So that's really, when I talk about psychedelics, that's what I've got in mind.
And by phenomenology, you mean the reporting of the subjective experience.
The felt experience, yeah. Mm-hmm. It's a very fancy word.